simply said, there is a God, prove to me that there isn't. But as I demonstrated earlier, that shouldn't necessarily be the case. You should provide evidence for it. Really quick, and I don't mean this in a pejorative manner, but you mentioned that the universe is finite. And there's a quote that I love by Albert Einstein that states that only two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm sorry, but the universe is not finite. That's one of its definitive characteristics. I don't really see much room in argument there. So once again, my position is simply that things that science can't explain don't automatically default to a God. So, anything else to add?
Well, I do want to ask, Chris, you said that the universe is expanding, and then you said it's finite. That doesn't really seem that. Which one did you actually say?
So it was not temporally infinite.
Oh, temporally.
Okay. I thought you said
okay. That's my fault. I misunderstood.
Yeah, I was just going to back up what you said, that a lot of times, that what you guys seem to be doing is that you're going on about there's the origin of the universe, science doesn't have an explanation yet, so therefore it has to be an explanation that humans have come up with just to explain it already without any proof. You can't just go in and say God did whatever science hasn't explained yet. It doesn't work like that. That's what he's talking about with the null hypothesis. So until you can show definitively that a supernatural being actually accomplished this instead of just unknown natural processes, you can't really agree with it.
That one you guys make too hard.
We are pushing that point overlaps, and we're talking about things like not just why this was in the universe, but why the universe itself. I believe that science is highly capable of explaining the natural world in terms of itself, of finding explanations for things that relate to other things. We're talking about the moment of singularity is when the system was constructed that allowed all these explanations to exist. I don't believe that science could ever prove what happened right before. It doesn't even make sense to ask what happened before time began. If you would like to deny that hypothesis, science will eventually answer that question, and so we should wait for that explanation. I'd like to hear that. But in terms of what we're trying to do, explaining what happened at that moment of singularity, when we don't know, we form hypotheses. And Occam's razor says that we go with the explanation that is the simplest, but that covers the most facts. I believe that the argument for the divine creator is the simplest and covers the most facts. Given scientific facts, mathematical facts about the universe, we have to postulate perhaps an infinite number of unobservable universes, or simply the appearance of a highly, highly unlikely event. It's so improbable to be impossible if you want to avoid the notion of the divine creator causing this thing instead of it generating itself. And we don't have a way of proving this, going back to the beginning. So what we have to do in the case of a lack of knowledge is talk about probabilities. We might not think that it makes sense to talk about probabilities in the case of the creation of universes, because we can't do it again. We can't run a multitude of tests. But we do know a lot of things about the forces of universes, about the universe, and what it does and does not permit. So I think we can make assertions about things involving those forces, and what they continually show is high, high probability of these things happening by themselves. So in terms of the logic of forming this hypothesis, I say that we go with what we usually go with, the thing that seems the most probable, covers the facts.
I'd just like to add that scientists can say we're still looking for an explanation for forever. I mean, taking that worldview to its logical conclusion, then we should still be looking for a solution to the Konigsberg Bridge puzzle, or how to make 1 + 1 = 3, saying we just haven't figured it out yet, but someday science will find a way. I'm saying, my point is, there comes a moment when God is the more reasonable explanation.
You said that science hasn't found a way to say that 1 plus 1 equals 3 yet. But the problem with making that metaphor is that 1 plus 1 equals 2 is an explanation in and of itself. We're saying that the origin of the universe doesn't have an explanation yet that is concrete, and that's vastly different than saying we haven't found like a separate explanation for it or a separate way of explaining it. And going on about what science can't do, what science can't find, is usually proves people wrong in the end. Like one of my favorite examples is people, like a few decades ago, thought computers would only take up a whole room in your house, and then I can carry it around in my book bag now. So that's just it's ridiculous saying that we can't do something, because then you're just negating any sort of thing in the future that we don't have knowledge of. One last thing, and then I'll pass it off to you to give something, is you at the beginning define God as a being who is all-knowing and all-powerful, but then you turn around and complain to us that we are postulating like an infinite regression. But by defining God in that way, you've already given him 2 infinite qualities. So it doesn't really work that way to define God as all-powerful and all-knowing, because he's infinite as well.
I don't. Yeah, sure. I believe, and I'm not trying to misquote you here, but my understanding of what you said is that you think that science is at a point where we pretty much could know everything about the Big Bang, or that natural explanations are just not exhaustive. I mean, 80 years ago we didn't know about plate tectonics, and you're ready to give up on theoretical physics. I think you might be a little bit premature there. There are some things that we do know about the Big Bang. We know that had we been there, I mean, it would be nothing like we could possibly imagine. It's nothing like we know right now in the world. There was no gravity, there's no strong or weak nuclear force, no electromagnetic force. None of that. There was no time. All of the matter in the universe was condensed into space about the size of a proton. Again, there was no before, and asking what came before the Big Bang is something akin to asking what's north of the North Pole. It's a nonsensical question. And bringing up Occam's razor, again, Occam's razor is the idea that the simplest explanation is often the best. If we have 2 explanations which explain something equally, yet one is much more complicated, in general, the simpler one is more likely to be correct. And bringing up Occam's razor in an argument for the existence of God is just, I mean, that kind of goes, by definition, the opposite of what Occam's razor is. To go back to, I believe that you made the prime mover argument, that is that everything that exists has to have a beginning. The universe exists, therefore the universe had a beginning. It was created. What do we think created the universe? Well, what created the universe? I would simply ask, well, what created God? If you say God created the universe, again, what created God? If you believe God exists, what created it? You don't know, neither do I. Why not simply have the courage to say, I don't know, and skip a step, and just say, I don't know? You could argue that God always existed. Well, again, I could argue that the universe always existed. Why not save a step and leave it at that? I mean, second of all, you don't know what created the universe, you don't know how God did it or anything like that. And you're defaulting to God because there is no concrete natural explanation yet. And the interesting thing about that is that it's sort of illogical. You're saying, I don't know what created the universe, therefore I know God did it. I mean, that's not necessarily logical, because you're stating that you don't know and you're concluding that you know. I mean, it's a non-starter. Additionally, the other problem with everything that exists has to have a creator is that it's an intuitive assumption, which is basically, in very complicated situations, not applicable. I mean, for all practical purposes, the Earth is flat. I mean, it doesn't look like it curves to me. It's only when we think outside the box and we get more information that we realize that it's round. And I don't mean to compare their position to stating that the Earth is round or flat. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to do. It's simply pointing out that arguments from intuition are simply invalid when it comes to very, very complicated things. And due to the fact that the Big Bang was nothing like we understand, I mean, it's difficult to find a situation where arguments from intuition could apply less. I think that it's also worth mentioning that if you've got problems thinking about how matter could simply come into existence from nothing, imagine how a complex intelligence could be there, just right from the get-go. I think that imagining something like that requires